We are now just about 60% of the way through the season, and I think it's safe to say things have been going pretty well for the Seattle Kraken. Just past the halfway point, they've already passed their wins and points totals from last year. So they've pretty much taken what they did in their inaugural season and flipped it on its head. I mean, literally speaking, if you take the standings from last season and flip it over, well, that's pretty much where the Kraken are now, sitting atop the Pacific Division. But how did we get here, and what has made the Kraken not just better than what they were last season, but a legitimately good team and a potential division winner? Welcome to the Cheap Seats, everybody. I'm Scott, and today we'll be taking a quick-ish, anyway, look at the 5 biggest things, at least to me, that have led to this great start to the Kraken season, as we're now more than halfway through at the All-Star break in this 2022-23 second year for the team. As we all know, the inaugural season for the Kraken did not go particularly well, at least from a wins perspective, as they finished the season last in the Pacific with a 27-49-6 record for 60 points. Of course, it did land them the 4th overall pick where they got Shane Wright, so maybe not everything was bad there. Still, no matter how tempered your expectations may have been for the first-year team, it was an inaugural season that didn't go anything like what most people were expecting. Which is kind of the one similarity between that season and this one, as once again, it's a season that's gone completely off the map as far as expectations are concerned, but this time in a good way. Now, yes, anybody involved with the team, and honestly even people that followed them closely last season, could have told you that this season probably would have gone better than the last one. Heck, even from the additions they made in the offseason, I think even people outside could have probably seen that coming in. But nobody saw the 29-15-5 record at the All-Star break that has them at 63 points and first in the Pacific Division coming. And there are a lot of reasons for this dramatic improvement year over year, certainly more than I have time to get to in this one video, so I'm going to try and boil it down to the top 5. The first of which, honestly, you could look at as an umbrella for the first 3, and that is the dramatic improvement in offensive production for this team. So far this season, the Kraken have been a better offensive team in pretty much every conceivable way, but ultimately it all boils down to goal scoring, where they've been scoring ever so slightly more than 1 extra goal per game than what they were scoring last season. This season scoring just over 3.6 goals per game, where last season they just got to 2.6. And as far as NHL rake is concerned, you can see the difference where they've been in the top 5, currently sitting at 5th for most of the season, and last year they were lucky to not be in last. Now, yes, as you can see, and as many have been eager to point out, part of the reason for that dramatic increase in goal scoring for the Kraken has been that while they're only getting the 1 extra shot on goal per game compared to last season, still sitting at 20th in the league there, they seem to be scoring on it with that extra goal per game, so their shooting percentage has increased like crazy, where they were shooting with about a 9% chance to score last season for 27th best, and are now sitting comfortably in first with a 12% shooting percentage this year. And while I'm not going to deny that the Kraken have been getting a few more lucky bounces this season than they did last, they certainly have, it has also always struck me as a bit odd that for whatever reason, whenever shooting percentage for a player or team gets much above 10 like it is here for the Kraken, that's seen as a statistic that points out a team's good luck. Whereas whenever save percentage gets too much below the average, that's just a goaltender being straight up bad. So maybe, just maybe, it could be that the Kraken are just that much better at finishing, certainly than they were last year, and also one of the best finishing teams in the league this season. Once again, the stats help point out that that could be the case. Weirdly, from a coaching perspective anyway, and I'm not in a meeting so I don't know this for sure, it doesn't seem like the offensive scheme has changed all that much from last season. This is still a team that, while sure they'd like to get in the offensive zone cleanly, they're more than happy to chip the puck in and go and fight for it along the boards in the offensive end, which they've gotten better at this season over last. But also, while they're still taking shots from the outside more often than most teams, they're doing much better at getting guys out in front of the net to either deflect pucks in or pick up rebounds and put those in. For last season, we saw a lot of shooting from the outside up by the blue line along the boards, but then there would be nobody out in front to pick up a rebound or try and tip a shot or screen the goaltender. This year, however, there's been a noticeable difference there, where the Kraken have been much better at getting net front, Once again, it shows up in the stats where last season, especially when it comes to deflecting shots in, the Kraken were one of the worst teams in the league at doing that. And this year, they've been above average in most areas. So even if some of that extra shooting percentage the Kraken have been getting has been due to a little more good luck and a couple extra bounces going their way, it seems to me at least that this could be one of those cases where the Kraken are just creating their own luck by playing better within that scheme of getting guys out in front of the net and then funneling pucks towards it, looking for either tips, putting in rebounds, or just screening the goaltender. As for where specifically in the lineup this extra goals production is coming from, well, the Kraken, after having just 3 players reach the 20-goal mark last season, do already have 4 on pace for it this season and a 5th that's pretty close. And while their leading points producer in Jared McCann last season got just barely to 50, the Kraken now have multiple players on pace for well over 60 and 8 on pace for 40. Where again, last season they had just 3 reach that 40-point mark. And well, sure, some of that is certainly due to the noticeable additions the Kraken made offensively in the offseason, namely Andrei Burakovsky, Justin Schultz, and Oliver Bjorkstrand, as well as, although he wasn't new to the organization, he's pretty much new this year, Matty Beniers. Beniers and Burakovsky being 2 of those 5 on pace for 20 goals. Really, the biggest strength of this team this season, and one of the biggest differences from last year, has been the depth production that they've been getting. By the end of their inaugural season, the Kraken had just 7 players reach the 10-goal mark. Now, a year later, just 49 games in, so not quite a year later, they already have a league-leading 8 players with 10 goals and another 4 that are on the cusp of joining them. Similarly, from a points perspective, last season by the end of the year, the Kraken had 14 players reach the 20-point mark. This season, again at the All-Star break, the Kraken lead the league and have already reached that same number with 14 players at 20 points or more, the next closest team this season being the Boston Bruins, who have 11. And it's also depth scoring for the Kraken that hasn't just shown up over the course of the whole season so far, but also game to game, where the Kraken have, once again, a league-leading 16 games with 10 or more players that each get a point in that game. Which is also probably why as the Kraken reached the halfway point of the season, 41 games in, although at the time they were 3rd in the league in goal scoring, they had yet to have a single player record a hat trick. Now, the very next game 42 of the season, Jared McCann did end up scoring a hat trick, the first one in franchise history on the road. But even still, at the All-Star break here, again, 49 games in, the Kraken, while they're still a top 5 team in goal scoring, they don't have a single player, not just within the top 50, but the top 80 players in points production. Their top points producer being Andrei Burakovsky with 39 points, which is good for a tie for 88th in the NHL at this point in the season. And I'll be honest, I haven't looked this up, so I could be wrong about it, but I think it's fairly safe to say that if the Kraken especially were to win the division, but even make the playoffs, they'd probably set some kind of record, if this were to hold up, for having the lowest ranking of their top scorer in the league overall points production. Sure, you'd probably think that especially if the Kraken were to win the division, that between now and the end of the season, at least one of the players would go on a hot streak and work their way past, well, at least higher up than 88th overall in the NHL. That having been said, they'd have to work their way up pretty high to even get to where the inaugural season Vegas Golden Knights were, where they won the division, with their leading points producer being Jonathan Marchessault, having 75 points, ranked 29th. Then again, who knows? Maybe it won't change. Maybe the Kraken will win the division without a single player in the top 100 in points production. After all, who needs a top-ranked points producer when you've got 2 guys on the 4th line scoring 11 goals and 19 points in Ryan Donato, and 15 goals and 28 points in Daniel Sprong. Again, it isn't just those 2 though. This is a full Kraken lineup that isn't just deep, it's deep with players having not just better seasons than last year, but career seasons. In fact, there's 10 players, including Beniers, which to be fair, this is his first full season, but 10 players that are having a career year in one of points, assists, or goals. And a few that are having career seasons in all 3. Now, yes, on top of Beniers, who's a rookie, I did also include Borgen in that, who is getting his first real chance in a full season in the NHL. So maybe it's closer to 8 guys that have really played a bunch, but I'm also not including Eli Tolvanen, who could be the 11th on that list, at least the way that he's played for the Kraken so far, with 8 goals in 15 games. And actually, especially when you consider that Tolvanen's previous career high, regardless of how many games he played in a season, was 11 goals in a season. He's easily going to break that just playing with the Kraken, even if you don't include the 2 goals he had in Nashville earlier on this season, which put him at 10 total on the season. The 8 that he has with the Kraken, yeah, he'll have no problem scoring another 3 or 4 to break that. Even outside of those guys, though, there's still Wennberg, Alexiak, Donato, and Sprong, who we already mentioned, that are all on pace to set career highs in goals. Sprong, in fact, having already set that record, as well as set a record for career high in points and assists. And as well, Jared McCann, who set a career high last year with 27 goals leading the team, and already has 23 once again leading the team this year, with a good chance to reach 40, so more than gonna blow his previous record out of the water. Meanwhile, while neither Larson or especially Eberle are likely to get their career highs in goals this season, as both of them are picking up apples faster than a Washington orchard farmer at harvest, they both have a chance to get their career high in points, especially Larson. But even with all of that having been said about all of those guys having great seasons, when it comes to why this team is so much better this year than they were last, and players having dramatic improvements year over year, one player stands head and shoulders above the rest, and that is Vince Dunn. First of all, on the offensive end, like those other guys we just talked about, Dunn, even after having a pretty good season last year where he tied a career high in points with 35, has been way better this season and is on pace for career highs in goals, assists, and already has a career high with 36 points. But Dunn's game and improvement last season to this has been much more than that and much more significant on the defensive end, where last year we did see some of that offensive production with Dunn occasionally come at the cost of a defensive mishap, often letting a puck past him at the offensive blue line that would turn into an odd man break or straight up breakaway the other way, and more often than we would like those times, that turning into a goal. But now this year, Dunn has done a much better job, not just at limiting those times where the puck gets past him, really not allowing the puck past him very often, and even when he does, it usually only happens that he'll pinch into the offensive end when he knows he has someone behind him, often his defensive partner in Larson, that can pick up the slack if he isn't able to get the puck where he's going down to get it. And also at the other end of the ice, Dunn has been much better in the defensive end. A lot more careful with the puck when it comes to breakouts, making sure that he has clean passing lanes and not just throwing it into the neutral zone to get it out of the Kraken end. Often, well, more often than we would like anyway, last season having that turn into a turnover that would then lead to another odd man chance or open shot on goal. This season, he's been a lot smarter with the puck in the Kraken end, making sure that he has clean passes and creating some pretty nice breakouts, which also again helps that the Kraken have just looked like a better team in transition. Actually looked like a team in transition, where last year that wasn't always the case. And while admittedly it is hard to find stats for defensive play, especially in the defensive end, Dunn is also on pace for career highs in hits and block shots, which aren't the most perfect stats in the world, but having both of them on pace for career highs definitely points in the right direction for a defenseman that plays as physical a game as Dunn does. And besides, the one stat that he's improved on the most this season, from not just last season but ever in his career, including those offensive numbers, so he's gonna blow out his career high here, barring injury, would be his time on ice. A stat that not only is meaningful because it shows that he is trusted by the coaches, him and Larson being one of the best defensive pairings in hockey, so it makes sense why they trust him, but it really shows how much he's added to this team and how good that pairing has been, that they're getting as much time on ice as they have, as they've been getting, at least for Dunn anyway, nearly 24 minutes of ice time per game, and recently, it's been even more than that. All in all then, it's been a season so good for Dunn, and I've said this before, that he's not just making it look like he was the right pick from the Blues in the expansion draft, but actually making it look somewhat foolish that anybody would think Tarasenko was clearly the better option. Especially considering that unlike Tarasenko, Dunn is just 26, and cost the Kraken much less than Tarasenko would have. Of course, that having been said, the one potential downside for the Kraken of how good of a season Dunn is having is that it is also a contract year for Dunn, and he will be getting a big raise in the offseason. Really then, at least to me anyway, the only player that can even compete with Dunn for biggest difference to the team last year to this year would be Matty Beniers. Sprong and Burakovsky could also make an argument, but I think Beniers certainly would be the next closest. He does have the noticeable advantage, as well as Burakovsky, of not having been with the team for the vast majority, or in Burakovsky's case, at all last season. And now this season, with Beniers, not only is he pretty much already the face of the franchise, he's also basically already won the Calder. I mean, it's certainly his to lose at this point, as long as he can stay healthy. But even outside of the Calder race and points production and all that, Beniers' maybe biggest asset to the team is that he's been one of the best 200-foot players, and often one of the best, if not the best player out on the ice for the Kraken. He's also well beyond his years when it comes to especially playing the puck along the boards, where last season in the 10 games he played, it did seem like he had maybe a easier time than others getting pushed off the puck by opponents due to his size and being just 19 years old at the time. But in just the offseason, he has completely turned that around, and it seems like close to 70 or 80% of the time, he comes away with the puck when it's along the boards with an opponent next to him. So obviously it goes without saying that Beniers is maybe the number one player that the Kraken need to get back healthy and keep healthy the rest of the way if they want to win the division, but even just make a deep playoff run once they hopefully get there. And when it comes to health, that is probably the number one biggest difference to me, maybe outside of the offense from last season to this season, certainly at the beginning of the year. Where last year, even outside of injuries, the Kraken had to deal with the tail end of COVID, which completely derailed their training camp and preseason. Something that, especially at the end of the year, not only the coaching staff, but also the GM and Ron Francis talked about being the biggest challenge that the team faced, not really getting a true training camp and a preseason that constantly saw players going in and out of COVID protocol, even I think having 4 to 6 players in COVID protocol the day before their first game. So then they basically came into those first couple weeks of the season, which were on the road, with a team that hardly still knew each other, which was a problem that immediately became evident on the ice, as the team had a hard time completing passes cleanly, knowing where each other were defensively and allowing constant odd-man rushes, and honestly was the start of the snowball that just continued to have problems throughout the rest of the year, and set that season off on the track that it ended up going on. Even outside of that, though, as the season went on, the Kraken still had far more injury issues than they had this season. Obviously, they lost Tanev in early December of last year. Even outside of that, they'd already had McCann go down for a while. Drieger had issues with injuries. Schwartz, again, had missed a lot of games through January and the rest of the season following that. And it just seemed like whenever the Kraken had a leading scorer, even Eberle missed some games while he was the leading scorer. The Kraken, I think, 4 times had their leading point scorer go down with injury for multiple games. Whereas this season, they had McCann go out for a couple of games early on, but he was back pretty quickly. The biggest injury issue the Kraken had through the first half was Grubauer. And fortunately, Martin Jones was able to fill that void relatively well. Well enough even that he's still the starting goaltender as of the All-Star break. Now, that has started to catch up with the Kraken here in these last few games. Obviously, they lost Beniers to a concussion for the last 2 before the All-Star break. Schwartz has been day-to-day for a while, and now Schultz is on IR. So, yeah, there's some issues there. Obviously, the Kraken did have to bring Jones in the first place because Drieger was out until, well, he's still not back and won't be probably for another month. But all in all, the Kraken have had a much better time with health than pretty much any other team in the league, and that has definitely been a big improvement last year to this year. Finally, the 5th biggest difference between the 2 seasons and what has made the Kraken so good this year, and I'm going to cheat again a little bit on this one and just go with a big umbrella and say team defense, and even include goaltending in here a little bit, but honestly I think the improvement in goaltending has had a fair amount to do with the improvement defensively. Now, statistically, so especially for people that are looking at this from the outside having not watched a ton of Kraken games this season, it would appear that the opposite is true, that the Kraken defense is still strong like it was last season and that goaltending has just been the difference, improving from last year to this year. But having watched every game of both seasons, I think, again, the defense has been the bigger story. Not to take anything away from Jones especially, but also Grubauer in some of the games he's played. But the defense, while they are, like last year, not allowing very many shots on goal, having actually improved a little bit there, currently ranked 3rd in the NHL in shots on goal per game, where they finished last season 4th, the difference has been the quality of those shots. Now, again, expected goals is still saying that the Kraken are only slightly better when it comes to not allowing quality shots. But the difference is, and I've talked about this a number of times before, With expected goals, they don't really measure how contested shots are, more just the shot location and whether or not it came off of a pass. The Kraken this season have really been doing a good job of locking down the center of the ice and not allowing odd man rushes the other way, both of which were things they noticeably struggled with last season. Sure, they didn't allow a lot of shots last season, but when they did allow shots, they were almost always open shots from wherever they were coming, completely uncontested, and there were also a lot of odd man rushes that led to those uncontested shots. Whereas this season, they're keeping any clean shots well to the outside, and whenever shots do come from more dangerous areas, there's almost always a defenseman right up in their face to make sure that if they do get a shot off, it isn't going to be a particularly good one, and that whoever's taking the shot has a really hard time putting the puck wherever they want it, giving their goaltender, Jones or Grubauer, whoever it is, a much better chance of making the save. And it's because of that, as well as better goaltending. I'm not going to pretend that the goaltending hasn't been better, I just don't necessarily think it's the primary story to why the goals against per game has also made a significant drop, dropping almost a half goal per game. So with that, this video's probably already gone on long enough. It certainly have been recording for a while now. We'll see what happens in editing. But let me know what you think are the biggest reasons for why the Kraken are better this season than last, and maybe just what has made them so good this year, even if it's not that big of a difference from last year. I will say that not everything has gone perfect for the Kraken. There are still some dramatic differences that need to be made in special teams where, just like last season, the Kraken are 31st on the kill, though they have been doing better of late and distanced themselves from number 32 in the Canucks a little bit. But they also have not been doing particularly well in the power play. Now their power play is still at 20% and somewhere around halfway in the league, but that's propped up quite a bit by a strong start to the season and has been pretty bad over the last few months. Otherwise, as long as the Kraken can stay 5-on-5, this is one of the best teams in the NHL, at least to this point, and honestly, I don't see any reason why that should change as long as they can stay healthy the rest of the way. Again, though, I'd love to hear what you think down in the comment section. If you disagree with anything I said or think I missed something, let me know down there. And if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below. Help support the channel, so I appreciate you using them. Until next time, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.